Welcome in, folks, to another great episode of I've Got a Theory. I'm your host, Henish Polakal. I'm here with my friend, Kristin Smith. Kristin, thanks for joining us.
Of course. Happy to be here.
So Kristin is a writing specialist. She's still in university, but plans to pursue writing and creative writing as her lifelong goals. Before we get into that, I want to take a moment to thank Manscaped for sponsoring the show and being critical in men's grooming, which is important to the modern man that thinks about other people besides himself, right? I mean, it's like, it's just for other people. So it's also for yourself. I would think that, having cologne and foot dusters and crop mops and different products that men don't think about, especially when we're younger, now becomes relevant because you have specialty products. So thanks to Manscaped for doing that. With that out of the way, Kristin, talk to me. What's your theory? What should we learn in this episode?
Well, I'm basically talking about point of view, especially in creative writing, but big picture, how point of view just dictates the way that we navigate the world. So in my book, The Psyche Behind Sci-Fi, The Power of Point of View, it's an educational think piece that teaches you the different points of view and like how your mentality changes with each point of view. So that's basically what we're going to dive into today.
Can you give us a Cliff Notes version of the different points of view and how that interacts?
Yeah, so there's 3 general categories that you learn about in school, but there's subsections to them. So within first person point of view, there's first person protagonist, first person secondary character, first person observer, and first person unreliable. So protagonist is just basically how people navigate. I am in my own mentality for this book, so we're only going to talk about me, I, myself. Secondary character is actually someone giving their commentary while watching someone else that they're close with and they interact with. So if your mom is telling a story about you when you were growing up and she's giving her commentary, it's focused on you, but you get your mom's flavor in there too.
Sure.
And then observer is, I call it Sherlock point of view, because Sherlock gives you the whole rundown with his opinions and this is what happened and this is that. That's observer. And then unreliable character is, Edgar Allan Poe, how his narrator is always kind of crazy.
Yep.
That unreliable narrator, you can't really trust them, so you don't know if they're trying to trick you or if they're just, neuroatypical. So those are like the different subsections. And then there's second person, which is telling, like, you get up, you go to the store, you walk over here. It's like the narrator is projecting a different personality and a different life onto you. So like you have to live based on what the narrator is telling you. Then there's third person, which is...
So the second person is kind of like he's the storyteller and you're just the object of the story.
Yeah, like you're, like I call it puppet point of view because they're telling...
He's the puppet master, yeah.
Yeah, you have no control, so you're like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. I have my own thoughts in here.
Yeah, they had that Will Ferrell movie that came out years ago that was like that.
Nice.
Do you remember seeing that one at all? I can't remember what it's called, but it was great because he found out partway through the movie that he was the character of a writer's book.
Really?
And then whatever she would write, he would end up doing. And then he would have this voice in his head, which was her second person point of view.
That is so cool.
It was a really good book because it was a lot about writing too. And then the writer was in like a writing slump, and then he became in like a personal slump on the book about him.
I'll have to look that up. That
Yeah.
Really cool. And then third person, there's third person limited, which you're following one person throughout the story, but it's just, so and so did X, Y, and Z. The narrator is just telling you about someone else's life. There's third multiples, so you see how different characters kind of like tie in together. So in movies, how you cut to one person, cut to another. Then like the Avengers, everyone comes together and you see how it happens. That's third multiple. Then there's third omniscient, which my friends and I called God point of view because this narrator knows everything.
They know your intentions. They know what you've done. They know what you're going to do.
So it's like there's no hiding from them. They know everything, but they're just dropping hints throughout it just so you can try to catch up, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Basically the points of views, and that's what I teach in the book. The definitions, but I also teach the applications.
Yeah, that's interesting because, first point of view, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, almost sounds like a biography, right? It's almost like so biographies a lot of times, especially, autobiographies more specifically, are first person, but a biography could be second or third person.
Yeah, definitely. Because, the best way to have a quasi relatable and reliable, rather. Autobiography is just to tell it yourself. So that has like a more personal feeling because you get the intimate details that only you know. And that's one of my favorite parts about first person protagonists, because you get this bond with the character that it's like, oh, I'm your best friend and you're telling me all these like intimate secrets that no one else knows.
Yeah, I felt this, their vulnerabilities, their fears, they'll share that kind of stuff.
And it's like, my favorite part about writing in that perspective is you're kind of in the in between of being the character and kind of being like their confidant. So it's like you're so invested in it. It's like, okay, I know how much this big moment means to you because I was with you the whole way. And that's so exciting to me.
Well, I know in my limited experience, I know that writing in the first person makes you want to put yourself in that character's shoes, right? You kind of become the role, but inadvertently, as a kind of rookie writer, you end up writing a lot about yourself in that role, right? You kind of project your own things, strengths, weaknesses, fears, etc., into that character because you know yourself best, and it's hard to write other characters until you have more practice.
Absolutely. I started writing when I was like 11, and I look back a few weeks ago at like my first draft of my first story, and I'm like, I should have just put my name in here. This is just all me. There's no other character. And then once you really start feeling for it, you kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes. But the easiest way to get out of that is to write your character as like biography. So you can really have them as a real person. Like that's someone that you would call on the phone.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, so that kind of gets to our point that we want to consider is that, considering these different points of views is very important with writing, but I feel like it's just as important with real life. When we're looking at what's going on in our community, in our household, in our state, in our nation, in our world, considering these other viewpoints and these points of views are super relevant, but some people don't grow out of it, right? Some people don't grow out of my first person perspective. How does this impact me? What's in it for me? What do I get out of this thing? Right. So, how do we teach people to think bigger than themselves when just living life?
Honestly, that's like literature has the ability to connect people in ways you never think of. One of the reasons I wanted to be an English major is to learn more about just how other people think and just the world as a whole. It's one beautiful thing about Georgia State. It has a very diverse community. And it's putting yourself in someone else's shoes when you're reading is just a great way to discover other people's problems, because some people who have, abusive households or like unstable relationships and stuff like that, books I've read about that's never been my experience, but by reading works that are told from like third multiple where so many different parts are coming together, it helped me really understand that life isn't binary and how you think about something at first impression is not what it really is. And I touch on that in the psych behind sci-fi, because I have one scene that the story begins with, and then I rewrite it through each perspective. So you understand that just because the protagonist thinks that these people are evil or this is what's going on, it's not as black and white as she thinks. The villains are the heroes in their perspective, and the heroes are the villains. So everything kind of meshes together in, the different points of view, because you learn about how other people perceive themselves, and taking yourself out of the protagonist really humanizes like whoever's your enemy.
And how relevant is that in our world today, especially with international conflicts, right? Especially with us having to deal with terrorism overseas, right? But meanwhile, if you ask those people, the U.S. soldiers and the coalition forces that go over there to fight are the terrorists.
I just had that conversation earlier this week, and it irks me to my core that people refuse to humanize those who don't look like them or who aren't in the same political party as them, because you never stop to ask them, hey, what's your life like? Or why do you believe this? Or what's your experiences that led you to be the person you are today, instead of just condemning them for being from another country. Like, we're all human. We all have our different lives. So talking about your just different perspectives and being an interactive member of our overall global society really helps people get out of that tunnel vision of first protagonist.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got a concerted effort from, media, policymakers, politicians to divide and conquer, right? They want us to see the differences between ourselves more so than the commonalities, because if I dig into it, you probably love your family, right? You probably love eating a cake once in a while, right? You probably might like riding a bike or, going for a walk, right? So I could go over 100 things with people, and on 90+% of them, they'd probably be like, yeah, I'm just like you on all of those things that we all like and enjoy or don't like, And so being able to think from that perspective seems so relevant, especially today in today's climate. And nationally, you're exactly right, right? If I happen to like a blue color over the red color or vice versa for my political parties, everything I do is wrong in the other party's perspective, right? And that's not necessarily the case, right? The thing is that we've got more in common and more that we'd want in common with every person in our country than is made out to be the case.
Everyone has the same shared goals. It's just how you get to that goal is way different. Because everyone wants kids to go to sleep with, a full stomach, or to be safe, or not have to look over your shoulder. But how we go about that, or how we think we should reach those goals, way different. And that's why we have a lot of these conflicts.
So reading, as you mentioned, is a great way to get you to understand that. Does your book specifically make that leap from just creative writing to, hey, how to critically think in your regular life as well, using these different points of view?
I use the short stories to really embody that. The written lectures tell you about the creative aspect, but the story shows you the feelings behind looking at someone else's life. So it's one of the segments, first person observer. The narrator is looking at, the battle scene, because, all right, sci-fi, so the main section of this is the battle scene. And they're like, I realize these people probably see me as a monster, but they don't understand that I'm trying to help us all. And that detail, everyone there wants the same thing. And I make it clear that everyone there wants the war to end. Everyone wants to be safe and thriving. It's just, they've separated each other so much and they've demonized each other so much that there's no way for them to sit down and talk. And that's just kind of how I feel like today is, because literature is a direct reflection of society. And I feel like people today don't think that we can achieve anything together because we've made each other monsters.
Yeah, we've divided people enough where, if they don't believe the exact same things or don't support the exact same people that we do, that they're wrong and everything they do about their life is wrong. It's like, I hate when you see bumper stickers on people's cars about XYZ, like, oh, you believe in this and we hate people that are liberals, or we hate people that are conservatives, or whatever it is. And it's like the distance between, on the scale of all issues, between what a liberal and a conservative thinks probably isn't that far, right? It's probably like somewhere towards the middle. It's not on either extreme necessarily, more often than not, or you could find common ground. But there's a third party that you're missing, which is the people that are pushing capitalism, that like the conflict, that profit off of it.
Absolutely.
Right. And same with your sci-fi genre, right? It's hard to put that in there and say, hey, there's this evil, militaristic, corporations that profit from selling guns and bombs and ammo and want the conflict to continue, regardless of what the two sides of the war field say.
Third, Omniscient really kind of shows you how pointless some of the battle is, because they're saying these people are over here doing this, the other group is fighting for this, but no one's using their words, and that's why they're all going to end up self-destructing. And it's kind of giving commentary as people progress. It's like, you're really not thinking about what the big picture is. What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
So you kind of destroy people. And as you were saying, I definitely see that, because war, there's always a winner. It might not be either the parties fighting, but it's whoever's pocket.
Someone's getting rich off of it. Yeah, right. Someone's getting rich off of it, because war is expensive, and when expensive means profitable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So very cool. So yeah, this is some of those topics that you don't really discuss a lot, but obviously if you're a writer or you're in the creative fields, then you have to think of point of view, because it's not always first person. It's not always about what I want and what my needs are and the story that surrounds me. It's everyone else and how they interact and the environment and the other conflicts that are going on that you have to think of, and not necessarily always from what's in it for me perspective.
Exactly. Earlier last semester, I was reading There by Tommy Orange. It's a book told in third multiple about this community in Oakland, an indigenous community, and how everyone interacts and how everyone's selfishness ends up hurting someone else. And I thought it was so powerful because you really do get stuck in yourself, but seeing how all these people who don't know each other at all end up converging in this unfortunate situation, because I don't want to give any spoilers.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous to see everyone's interconnected, and it blows my mind how people decide not to acknowledge that. Because I bet if we pulled up all of our LinkedIns and our phone numbers, we'll find a common friend or family member or someone we've met between the two of us.
Sure.
And
No, it's a super small world. And I have to always remind people, hey, you're not just meeting me, you're meeting everyone that I know as well. Because what if I could refer you to someone, or what if I could introduce you to someone that I know? So it's not just anytime you're interacting with someone, you're never interacting with just that person. You're interacting with that person's sphere of influence as well.
And that's why I value sincere connections rather than like, I'm trying to use you, you're trying to use me. Because in the long run, we'll probably run into each other again. And that's one thing literature teaches us too, because one character's actions affect another's, but that interaction made one person kinder to further kindness. And that's just, like I say, my personality is based off of a library, because all these interactions between characters and just that interpersonal kindness I've picked up on, that's just so like wholesome to me. I've tried to take that on, and I've tried to like project that to other people. But had it not been for literature, yes, my family is very kind, but I don't think I would have felt that in my chest and my soul if not reading through someone's intimate thoughts on a paper to carry them on to someone else.
And I think we both agree that books do a much better job of that than than movies and TV shows.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot more easy to be immersive and imagine and recreate that environment in your own head when you're reading it versus when someone's showing it to you on a TV screen.
That's definitely true. And that's one thing I kind of talk about in this book, because setting is one thing that sci-fi is known for, these amazing worlds, these moving pieces, but you can only describe so much of something without it being like, this much of a paragraph to describe like, the table. So you give people the framework to work within, but it really gets to their heart because they fill in the details of what they want to see, and it just personalizes it further.
Yeah, no, I agree. I still love reading, and I kind of amped it up several years ago when I got a Kindle, and now I can read multiple books at one time, depending on what I feel like. Because I find that sometimes at night when I'm going to bed, I want to read a different book than in the morning when I wake up and I'm laying in bed for another 20 minutes or whatever. Or even just if I'm just picking up a book on the weekend, depending on my mood, I like being able to flip between them quickly. So between that and audiobooks, which is kind of similar to reading, I feel like I'm getting a lot more reading done than I did when I was younger. And it's fun because I'll mix it up between sci-fi and fiction and nonfiction books as well, because I like to learn. I also like to be entertained.
Exactly. I'm really glad that you're saying that, because I feel like some people don't read when they get to be adults because they've had bad experiences in school. Because I know some of my classmates who loved literature when we were in middle school, half of high school, then we got to our AP classes, and then they're like, I don't feel like I'm smart enough, or I feel like I'm not doing well. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this book, is to help people, give you tips to help people be more comfortable, and that like positive association with literary studies and creative writing will further people reading in the future.
Okay, so Kristin, so what are some tips that we could provide people that could get them to consider other points of views and the importance of them, not just with their writing, but also just in real life, right? One we discussed already is please read more books, right? Pick up a book, half an hour a week, half an hour a day, whatever you can do, because it can be so beneficial to your life, right? Well, and regardless of what the book is, right? Even if it's trash literature, it doesn't matter because you're still reading something. If it's fun, it just gets you in that habit then.
Yeah, literature is a great way to just consider other people and just other walks of life. I personally recommend trying to write a genre that doesn't have to do with your normal interests. doing research like really has helped me. So some of my characters are not, you know, from my specific demographic. So I'll go do research about other cultures so I can have a more well-rounded character, because what's the point of representation if it's just a Sally Sue or like just a caricature? You want characters. So just with writing, that's what I always recommend people doing. Obviously, don't try to like, you know, be too stereotypical about like the different nuances of that demographic's culture, but get to know different people and make those characters come alive by doing your research and, you know, scrolling through Twitter and the different subsections, seeing how people really interact.
Do you ever find that you base your characters off of people that you know?
Sometimes. One of my writing instructors said a good way, like a good starting place, but not ending place, is find someone famous or find someone that you admire and like write about them, like, you know, their key points, and then like kind of shift it based on the character and how you want them to fit in the story. So if I were to write about like a tennis player as a character, I'd start with Serena Williams, because Serena Williams is that legend.
Yeah.
I feel like her worth ethic, but instead of always having her win all the time like Serena does, let's have a losing streak to kind of like, you know, sub out different things to make it a more whole character, because it's easy to make someone real if they're based off of someone real.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, those are great tips. And I think that a lot of people could benefit from thinking about it from more than just their own perspective, not just reading and not just writing, but also just their life in general, right? Thinking that there's something more and there's something bigger than just each individual, right? That we're collectively the organism that counts is that all of us.
Yeah, I've definitely found myself to be a more considerate person. Like the more I write and do research, the more I really want to just connect with other people and learn about other walks of life, because my way of life isn't the only way of life. And I realize that, and I want to know more about other people, because the only way to really make progress is to learn about other people's cultures instead of saying, oh, that's weird, I don't like that.
Yeah, no, I remember one of the points that stuck with me when reading Life of Pi a few years ago was they were talking about the animals in the zoo, right? And you know, originally before the kid ends up on the lifeboat with the tiger and a couple other animals, his family had a zoo, right? I don't know if you ever read that book. Have you read Life of Pi?
No, I think I was like 15 when it was trending, and I was like, let's read those YA romances instead.
So Life of Pi is a good book, but you know, one of the things that he says is, hey, when people are against zoos because we're caging in animals, well, how do you know? How do you know that animal isn't saying, hey, this is my room, this is my house, and I'm safe, I'm protected, I'm fed, I'm well cared for here, and I like it, you know? So you don't know that necessarily. It is a point that they brought up, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting perspective that I wouldn't have thought of. When people go to a lot of zoos and you're like, oh, poor animals that are caged up. I guess it depends on the condition of their housing, I suppose, at the zoo. But you know, it just made you think of, hey, what's this other perspective that animals are thinking of if they're in a zoo? It just kind of opens up the mind that, hey, there's so many different perspectives that you can think of when you're reading a book that come from other characters, right? That make you think of that, because you might not be having that conversation with someone else.
Yeah, and that's like literally my favorite part about literature, just learning about other people's mentalities. Because it's kind of boring to read about people just like yourself all the time. Like, it's cool here and there, but the learning factor, I always say English is the zenith of the humanities, because we do everything. Because I have to do research about cultures, I have to do research about history and things of the sort, and how it comes together to make a story.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Well, awesome. Well, Kristin, thank you for spending some time with me on our show and sharing about point of view, because that was really insightful, and hopefully we can get some benefit out of for everyone. I want to take a moment again to thank Manscaped for supporting the show and providing cool products for guys. And if you guys like the show, please like, comment, subscribe. Another great episode of I've Got a Theory. Thank you, Kristin, for joining me.
Of course, I had a lot of fun. Thank you.